I'm very happy to welcome you to today's presentation about what's happening in the fire district here. Eric Loudenslager moved to Arcata in 1983 to join the Department of Fisheries Biology at HSU. In the fall of 2021, he was appointed to the board of directors for the Arcata Fire Protection District, serving as board president in 2024. And is it Chris that I have here?
Yes.
Yes. Good. Chris Emmons was raised in Arcata, graduating from Arcata High, has had a 30-plus year career in fire protection services, working with the Arcata Fire Protection District, City of Eureka Fire Department, Humboldt Bay Fire, and CalFire. He has a Bachelor's of Science degree from CSU Long Beach. We welcome them both, and I know this will be a very educational presentation. We look forward to hearing it, and it's now all yours, Eric.
Okay, we're gonna get our tech guru in here to help complete the share.
And by the way, if you have questions, you have the option of putting your hand up, and we'll hope to see you. And otherwise, you can put your questions in the chat and we'll get to it. You can do them as you go or wait till after he's presented. And Eric, you can always take a pause and ask for questions if you want.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Ross. We're working off of a new large Aquas board, so that's why we needed our technician to come in and give us a hand. It's all new to us.
A young person. Okay, first I want to thank you, Jane, for inviting me to present, and I invited Chris, the fire chief, Chris Emmons, to join me. One of my sort of underlying philosophies is that when I'm working in an organization like this, both those above me and below me should know what I'm saying in a public forum like this. So I invited him to join us. Also, whether it's the city government, county government, or a special district like this, board members can give presentations and can speak in the public about their personal views. But we're not, without going through the board, we're not supposed to present something as though it is from the board. And so I need to make clear to everyone today that this presentation, particularly when it gets into policy elements and prescriptions for implementing policy in the future, that those are the opinions and perspectives of one board member, me, and doing any of the things I suggest will require concurrence of the board, a vote of the board, and moving forward with resolutions and ordinances and things like that. As well, in an organization like this, the board serves as the local legislative body, and we establish policy and guide strategy, and the chief, as the general manager, CEO, CFO of the organization, is the one that implements that guidance. And so having him here today, in my view, is important because if there is particularly detailed questions having to do with how we would implement things and make any decisions, he would take the lead on those. What you're seeing in front of you on this first slide first, fire agencies, we still call ourselves fire agencies, but they're really first responder agencies in this day and age, where we deal with all risk emergencies. So we have fire, emergency medical service, hazardous materials, things like vehicle extrication. We do goodwill calls. We teach people how to put car seats, child car seats in cars. So we do all sorts of things that have to do with community risk reduction. So we're in a situation here in our district where both the city of Arcata and CalPoly are interested in moving forward with plans of infill and taller buildings. And we don't have the capacity to do that at this time. And we're in the process of planning for that, which is why Jane asked me to give this talk. And what you're seeing in front of you is the table of contents for my presentation. I want to give a quick, brief introduction, a bit of history about how we wound up with the fire district in this community. I want to talk about the governance and policy framework dealing with districts and other options. Then talk about staffing and equipment required for 4-story buildings, what it's likely to cost for expanding both facilities and staffing, and then what I refer to as priorities for fiscal stability, which is the actual ordinances and things we need to pass through the public, and then options for financing, who gets to pay for it, and how my views about how those costs should be distributed. Okay,
Sorry. Double tap that back.
okay, so the Arcata Fire Protection District is a California independent special district, and I will explain what those are in greater detail in a few slides. But I wanted to start out by letting you know that the district is governed by 5 elected/appointed board members. We have 3 staffed fire stations. One is in McKinleyville on Central Avenue. The second one is near the Mad River Hospital on James Road in Arcata. And the third station is in downtown Arcata, right off the plaza. Each of those are staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We have an engine at each location that's staffed with 2 people, 1 captain and 1 engineer. Our jurisdiction is approximately 64 square miles. It includes the city of Arcata, Bayside, Manila, McKinleyville, and Jacoby Creek. Our population of the district is about 36,000 people. We have about 3,700 incidents that we respond to each year, and about 8% of them are fire and 50% of them are emergency medical services. I want, as I start into this and talk before the history, I want you to appreciate that first responder agencies, not only in California, but in the United States, are typically under local authority, either a district, a city, or a county. Counties and cities can have other sorts of funding, but particularly if you're dealing with a district, we're funded with property tax and parcel assessments. There is also no legislated statutory staffing requirements. There are staffing best practices that are recommended by the National Fire Protection Association. And I'll show you some of those in a few moments. Actual staffing reflects a balance of the community desire for service and a willingness to pay. And if we typically, this isn't just in the Arcata Fire Protection District, but almost anywhere, if you go out to the public and ask them what they want for service and coverage, they will describe a Porsche, an Audi. And then when you do a separate analysis and ask them what the funds are available to pay for it, you'll wind up with a used Corolla. And somewhere in between the job of the politicians, that is the district board and other community entities, need to come to some sort of consensus on a balance of how much we're going to pay and what the efficient staffing is going to be for the community. Okay, I think it's worthwhile. We want to know where we can go. We want to know why we're at now. I think it's worthwhile to visit for a little bit about the history of fire service in our, and I'll refer to it as in our community, and that includes both the town of Union, city of Arcata, and the adjacent unincorporated areas. And there's a wonderful book. I don't know if this is available at in the Humboldt room at the Cal Poly Library. If it's not, I think we have enough copies. One at least should be deposited there. But there was a ex-professor, Joe Trainer, that sat down and went through all the old newspapers, all the minutes from the town trustees and city council and the Arcata Volunteer Fire Department and the fire district, and put together a book called the AVFD, Arcata Volunteer Fire Department, the first 100 years. So it's almost getting dated. Now we're a little ways away from it, but it covers a lot of the nuts and bolts of what it was like to establish fire protection services in our community. Starting in the beginning, so Arcata, which started out with the name Union, was established in 1850, and actually for the first 34 years, from 1850 until 1884, there was effectively no fire protection service in the town of Union / city of Arcata. In the late 1850s, there was a small attempt by the city trustees to establish a hook and ladder company, and they came into existence for about a year and then vaporized into the ether. In 1875, but during that time, from 1850 until 1875, there was regular editorials in the local newspaper, the Humboldt Union, howling for the trustees in the city of Union / Arcata to establish some sort of fire service. And it never happened. There was complacency in City Hall. And in 1875, the north side of the plaza burned down. From what would be Hensel's Hardware to the Jitter Beam building, that whole side of the plaza burned down. 25 buildings burned down, and the only thing they had, there was no fire service to help put it out, and the only water supply was a pump in the middle of the plaza. And so that motivated the city trustees in 1875. They did two things. One, they established a contract with a water company, and they put in reservoirs up in the hills. If you go up on the trails above the city of Arcata now, you can cross one of the old dams, and there's a little plaque there that says this was the Arcata water supply, till 1964 or something like that. So they built reservoirs up in the hills, captured the water from the creeks, and pumped it and brought it down to the plaza, and set up hydrants down on the plaza. They finished the water supply in 1884, and shortly thereafter, the city suggested, put out notices that there should be a fire service established. And it's interesting that, so it started out as Arcata Hook and Ladder Company #1. Over the years, it changed from Arcata Hook and Ladder Company 1 to the Arcata Fire Department, to the Arcata Volunteer Fire Department. That organization still exists today, and it's known as the Arcata Volunteer Firefighter Association. It is a nonprofit corporation. It was not affiliated with the city. It was completely independent. It had it's incorporated, still is today, and it was not operated by the city. It was operated by themselves. And the city purchased ladders and hoses, and the company organized and staffed for fire suppression. As the city of Arcata grew, as the community grew, fire hydrants were added out into peripheral areas, and there was a need and a desire from communities surrounding Arcata, unincorporated areas, wanted to have fire service themselves. So in 1927, the city trustees actually passed an ordinance that said no city fire trucks could travel outside of the city boundaries. And there was considerable angst and disagreement between the city, the fire department, and the unincorporated parts of the community about how to service those outer areas. And in 1944, the communities surrounding, the unincorporated communities surrounding Arcata formed Fire District #5, and it included Jacoby Creek, Bayside, Fickle Hill, Arcata, Bottom, McKinleyville, Dow's Prairie, Warren Creek, and Essex. So the Arcata Volunteer Fire Department started in 1884. The fire district actually was established in 1944. The volunteers started in the city, and the district started in the unincorporated areas. There still was, in the period between 1944 and 1949, there was arm wrestling and squabbles between the city, the district, and the volunteers about where the boundaries lay for various different obligations. And in 1949, they actually established a written agreement for the use and operations of fire engines and equipment between Arcata Volunteer Fire Department, Arcata District 5, and the city of Arcata. And the agreement was that the AVFD would service everyone, that they would provide the staffing to put out all the fires, that Arcata District #5 would pay $75 per incident to the city, and the city would allow fire engines to be used outside of the city jurisdiction as long as one remained. Moving forward, in 1953, there was actually a fire chief. His name escapes me. I apologize for that. But he had been the fire chief for 29 years. And when he retired in 1953, he made an argument to the district and to the city that things had grown enough and things were active enough. He was busy enough that they needed a full-time fire chief. And so at that time, the fire chief that didn't work for the city, didn't work for the district, he worked for the Arcata Volunteer Fire Department. But the city would pay his salary and the district would pay his salary, and that was split 45-55. Later in the 1950s, it's what I call the McKinleyville revolution, if you will. And McKinleyville was growing at that time. McKinleyville had a McKinleyville Improvement Committee And they were quite unhappy that all the firefighting apparatus and all the firefighting personnel were operating out of the city of Arcata, and they didn't believe that they could have timely service to the McKinleyville area. And so there was once again more arm wrestling between the district, with the volunteers, with the city of Arcata. And at that time, there was actually, McKinleyville was contemplating breaking away from the district and forming their own district right here. And it was decided that between them all, that we would build a station here in McKinleyville. That's how the McKinleyville station first came to be and was built in 1960. Should be noted that the land the station is on was donated by the Pearson family. There's the squabbles, the disagreements, the arm wrestling continued over rental of fire hydrants, rental payment for water. Just there was, one way or another, there was always disagreements and arguing back and forth between the various entities. And one challenge that the city had that I can certainly understand didn't have anything to do with the district, but in the late 60s and into the early 70s, the city manager and the city attorney were not happy at all that the fire chief didn't have reporting to the city manager, and that the fire chief did not report to the city council, did not report to the city manager. It was a real problem for them. The way the city solved that was that in 1974, with Ordinance 801, the city requested annexation into the district. One of the requirements for them to be annexed into the district was to build Mad River Station. There were three criteria in that Ordinance 801. One was build Mad River Station. A second one was to continue to rent the downtown station for 10 years. That downtown station was and still is owned by the volunteers. And the third was to run efficient, have capacity for efficient service so that the city didn't lose any of their ISO ratings. So we have an ISO rating of 3 now. I think it was 4 or 5 at that time, and the city wanted the district to manage their affairs and the capacity of the fire service so that insurance rates didn't go up for people in the city. 2005, so these last two dates, and the final third one is next year. But the was actually in circa 2005 with Chief McFarland that the district board interviewed and hired its first fire chief without a vote of the Arcata Volunteer Fire Department. So between 1944 and 2005, it was actually the members of the volunteers that voted annually for who the fire chief would be. And then the district board just ratified that. And so it was as late as 2005 that the district actually took over that official capacity of supervising the fire chief. Circa 2015, within the district, we formed the volunteer logistics unit, and the Arcata Volunteer Fire Department no longer was involved in first response. And we have that logistics unit, and they transitioned from being the Volunteer Fire Department to being the Volunteer Firefighters Association. And that's where we stand today. The volunteer logistics unit is managed and supervised under the fire chief, answers to the fire chief and the board of directors, through that to the board of directors. We are currently in the process of purchasing the station from the Arcata Volunteer Firefighter Association. We're in the middle of that now. We're in escrow as we speak. And this was a effort, took 7 years, something like that. But the board in particular felt strongly that we should own that property, that it should be part of our portfolio. We shouldn't be renting it, and capital improvements at that location should be on our books. What I've tried to do with this little history is give you an idea that there has always been conflict and bruised elbows, scabbed elbows, if you will, dealing with different nonprofit and government entities that have slightly different missions and obligations, all trying to achieve one goal. But there's always issues and challenges to work out. And so this is from page 118 in Joe Trainer's book. I don't know what it was that led, this is a quote from his book, and what the event was that promulgated him to write this. I'm uncertain. I'd have to go back and look at it, but to me, this encapsulates the situation we're in today. But the city tended to feel that the district was slow in assuming responsibilities, and the district felt that the city was continually taking actions that weakened the district's position. And I would maybe word it a little differently, but I think that pretty much capsulizes the situation that we have today, with different government entities having different mandates and obligations, trying to make them congruent with one another. Governance and policy. So there's probably more than 3, but there are at least 3 local governments in the state of California that are regulated by the state. And one is counties. There shouldn't be district over there. There's counties, there's cities, and special districts. And each of them have different obligations under state law. And I just wanted to touch on those briefly. So if we look at counties, so I took this page, if you will, from a 2014-2015 Humboldt County Civil Grand Jury report that was called Rural Safety. And in it, they argued that the county needed to step in and take a more active role in the unincorporated rural fire districts that we have in the county. And one of the pages in that document was a list of all the things that the California Government Code requires counties to have: district attorney, sheriff, clerk, et cetera, et cetera. If you look down through that list, it does not include any fire agencies. Counties have no responsibilities for providing any kind of fire service. We do have a county office of emergency services, and there is a county fire chiefs association. So there are some links with the county. The chief, in a few minutes, if need be, can elaborate on some of those. But by state law, the counties do not have obligations for fire service. That contrasts with cities. Cities are required to have a fire department. That's by state law. A city must have a fire department unless they are part of a fire district. And we're a special district. We operate under the Fire Protection District Law of 1987. And so the salient points here are that the city of Arcata chose, they had an obligation to have fire service. They were uncomfortable with the relationship they had with the volunteers. in that it really wasn't their fire department. And that one way to solve that problem was to have them be annexed into the district and have the district fulfill those responsibilities and obligations. And this cut and paste is the first paragraph in the Fire Protection District law. And basically what it says is that you're not going to get any money from us, and what you choose to do, you have to pay for, in essence. So the legislature supports and encourages the formation of fire districts to provide all these emergency services, but the scope and scale of the services that you provide will be determined by the local community based on the conditions that exist there and the local resources that are available. Can I just do a backspace?
Yeah.
So at this juncture, I want to let the audience know that there actually are multiple modes that fire protection services are provided in communities like ours. And when I refer to communities like ours, I am referring to cities with unincorporated areas around it, or cities that abut one another that have a desire to formally coordinate their activities. We're implementing one of them here, where we have a fire district and the city is annexed into the fire district. Another one is where you have a city that has a fire department and the fire district is established in the unincorporated area and then contracts with the city to provide the fire services. A third one is a joint powers authority. And we have one of those next door. Humboldt Bay Fire is a joint power authority. It's Humboldt Fire District #1 and the city of Eureka Fire Department were joined together in a JPA called Humboldt Bay Fire. And a couple of the board, there will be the city council, there is a board of directors for the district, and there's a board of directors for the JPA. And the JPA will include board members from the district and council members from the city. And a third type of arrangement would be a county that would have a dependent, rather than having an independent special district, would have a dependent district. They have one of those in Alameda County. And so the Alameda County Fire District is a dependent district. The County Board of Supervisors is the legislative authority over the district. The fire chief reports to the Board of Supervisors, and there are cities and unincorporated areas that are affiliated in that. And the cities that are within that have contractual arrangements with them. So I'm trying to identify that the model that was elected to be used by the city of Arcata and agreed on by the district is not the only one that exists. Special districts. So we operate under state law. We're an autonomous government entity. We're accountable to the voters we serve. So our constituents, we are accountable, the board, the fire chief are accountable to the citizens that are within the district borders. Not the city or county. We're not accountable to the city. We're not accountable to the county. We have to follow state laws for the taxes we can collect, bonded debt we can accrue, the way we have our public meetings, the way we keep records and elections are all laid out in state law. These next two gold points, if you will, are essential for our understanding of things as they move forward. One is that special districts, whether it be the McKinleyville Community Service District that provides sewer. I don't know if they do water, but they do sewer and parks here in McKinleyville. Humboldt Municipal Water District, the Humboldt Bay Harbor District, our fire district. We all provide services that the communities that we're in wanted. So the citizens, the constituents in our communities said they wanted these things. They believed that they were best delivered by a government entity, not a private company. And so they were organized into a district under state law. And the other major tenet that we need to appreciate is that funding districts, particularly our benefit assessments, the costs are allocated to parcels based on the benefits received. So generally, there's not a subsidy from one part of the district's constituency to another. Special district revenue. Most over on the left-hand side, property tax, benefit assessment, special tax, fees for service. Those are the typical ways that special districts receive revenues. And what I put on the right-hand side is the elements that we have of those four particular items. So there's property taxes. If you're homeowners, you pay property tax. You probably paid it recently. And we know from Prop 13 that our bill is 1% of our property assessment, and we get, the fire district gets 5.6% of the 1% that you pay to the county for your property tax assessment. There are also things called benefit assessments, and benefit assessments are fees. They're not tax. That the courts decided that, not us. It's based on the benefit for a particular parcel, and that's determined by an engineering study. And the vote to implement a benefit assessment is done by a polling of the parcel owners. It does not appear as a ballot on the general election ballot, and it's 50% plus one of weighted ownership. So if you own, I don't know if that's weighted by parcel or weighted by the number of benefit units per parcel. It could be the latter. I would have to check on that. We have a benefit assessment. For those of you who have looked at your property tax, there was a benefit assessment on there. We established that rate in 2006. It was the last upgrade and reevaluation of the benefit assessment. There's also something called special taxes, and these are a tax, and they're voted on during a general election. It takes 2/3 vote to approve them, and the appropriation limits, the GANA limits apply to those. We also have something called enterprise fees, which are fees for service. And so we have a fire marshal that inspects building plans for fire code consistency. And we are required by state law to inspect schools, apartment buildings, hotels, maybe some other things. And we charge for those. So those would be, we can't charge more than it costs us to deliver those services. By state law, we cannot use our general fund monies to support the fire marshal and building inspector. We can't charge more for the fire marshal and inspector fees and use that to infill money that we need in the general fund. Special district financial challenges. our taxation options are restricted by state law. So we don't get TOT is the transient occupancy tax. We don't get sales tax. We're not allowed to have a sales tax. We don't have a utility tax, and we don't have development impact fees. So the city, so if you're in the city of Arcata, they have the TOT, they have sales tax. If you're in the city of Arcata and you have a utility bill, there's a local component on your sale. The city can add a tax element to your utility bill. To my knowledge, the city of Arcata does not currently have development impact fees. They do have lots of enterprise fees dealing with hooking up to the sewer system if you're building in Arcata, and your water bill if you're living in Arcata and you get a water bill each month, that's an enterprise fee, a fee for service. Our taxation is considerably constrained by voter initiative. So Prop 13 set the overall taxes on property assessments at 1% and set the reassessment at a maximum of 2% per year. Prop 4 a year later was again initiative that set our appropriation limit at population and inflation adjusted value. Prop 218 established voter right to know and set up all the rules around requiring a 2/3 majority for any agreement on tax increases. Challenges, the first two are legal and political. The last two are social, in my view, social psychological, in that there's, at least in my view, constituent tax fatigue. We actually had, I was quite surprised that here in Humboldt County, almost all the tax measures passed, and including a special tax in Neyland for their fire district that included an inflation factor. And I don't think it has a deadline on it. So our 2020 special tax has a sunset date of 2030, and it's got no inflation factor built into it. So one is constituent tax fatigue. Down in Santa Cruz, they had a couple of big bond measures for their fire services turned down. So now their fire chiefs and boards and communities are trying to figure out where to go next. And the second challenge, financial challenge for us, is lack of coordination and integration with other local governments. And that is with the city, the county, and Cal Poly, getting together with them, working on impact fees, looking forward and trying to figure out things ahead of time when people are developing polytechnic transition plans and updates to city general plans. The fire district needs to be brought in well ahead of time to look at our capacity and what needs to happen to accomplish the service that needs to be delivered. From a policy perspective, and I will put the asterisk here that this is one board member's perspective on governance and policy, and that is the fire chief serves as our trusted expert. He's our subject matter expert, and that serves both for the board, for the district, for the city of Arcata, and for the county of Humboldt, for those regions within our district borders. The district board, so he's our expert. He's the one that the board trusts and goes to for expert opinion. It's the board's responsibility. We have responsibility, we have authority, and we have accountability to our constituents, put together an efficient and reasonable and sufficient first responder service. It's the board that establishes, through consultation with the chief, district staffing, district station location, equipment that they need. And this includes what's needed in the city of Arcata and what's needed for Cal Poly Humboldt and what's needed in the unincorporated areas of the county. Fire chief does not report to the city manager. The fire chief may go to city department meetings to provide input to them and to hear what they're saying so he can bring information back to the board. But the chief does not report to the city manager. Those are for me, their peers. The district is autonomous from the city. And likewise, from my standpoint, the board of directors is a peer to the city council, and the city council chose to join the district, and they should consequently to defer to the district on all things dealing with capacity and suitability of our equipment, our stations, our staffing for dealing with things that the city might need serviced. So this is actually text that I took out of a standard of coverage, but this to me is my overarching view of my policy, my personal policy toward the district and what our responsibility is. And that is I mean, we have a commitment to the community and we have a mission statement, and that mission statement's not here. But for me, the policy is that if fire services are provided, they must be done so with the safety of firefighters, property, and the citizens in mind. That's an overarching theme for me. We need to, and under that, the expansion of that is that we need to respond with sufficient speed and weight of attack to keep fires contained within a room in a single family residential fire, or within a unit in a multifamily apartment, to keep emergencies moderate and to keep them from escalating. And in the lexicon of the fire service, this is the ERF, the response, the needed response force. And we need to maintain sufficient staffing to protect the lives of firefighters, residents, and property. And why? So this is a schematic that shows the growth of fire after they start. And once they get started, we have a very short period of time. They may start slow. It may, take a half an hour to get to the point where anybody notices that something's on fire and that it's actually spreading. But once it starts to spread, it spreads quickly. And in our current construction, the current use of petroleum-based products in homes and apartment buildings, the flashover point, which is, and explosive incineration of flammable gases. So you start a fire, and once it actually gets going, the heat in a room is going to build up and thermally decompose the furniture, the carpet, paint. All the things in that building are going to thermally decompose, release gases into the air. The temperature will continue to rise as things are burning, and you'll get to a point where those vapors will ignite and explode. It's called flashover, and in our current building construction practices, flashover is actually several times sooner than it would have been a few decades ago because of the kinds of materials we're using. The little graphic below that talks about response, what we want for our response is 90 seconds from the time you dial 911 until the time the operator contacts the appropriate authorities at the fire district. 2 minutes from the time that call is received until the engine is rolling out of the station, and then 4 minutes to get to the scene. On my screen, I can't actually see the numbers over on the far side. But why do I have these views? Why is this policy? Well, and these are the United States, 2015 or 2010 to 15 or 2015 to 20, something like that. So over that period of time, an analysis showed that as a rate per 1,000 fires, if you can confine the fire to a room or smaller before you can get in there and put it out, you have 2 civilian deaths. If you can confine it to the floor of origin, you have 16 deaths. If you can only confine it to the building or larger, then you have 24 deaths. And the costs, and I don't know what year those costs were determined in, but the costs go up exponentially. So our goal is to get there fast and put it out quick. And when we can do that, we're successful. So the recommended deployments for different kinds of fires, and this is where it's germane. Cal Poly 6- and 7-story dormitories in some places would be called high-rise, other places they would be called mid-rise. But nonetheless, you can see there is a stepwise incremental, it's not a gradual linear increase in the number of firefighters that you need to put out a fire. It's a step up. And so number of firefighters, this is the National Fire Protection Association's recommended deployment. The first unit is to arrive in 4 minutes. All units are to arrive within 8 to 10 minutes. For a residential structure, small commercial structure, typically 14 to 16 people. Firefighters required for medium commercial, multifamily, 2- 3-story apartments, they're recommending 25. Firefighters required for a large commercial, industrial, or 4+ story building is 38 firefighters. And once again, all of the people who are checked in show up over on my right-hand side, so I can't see that, but I don't need to. I know that the number at the bottom of Bozeman is 29. But what I've done here is shown you the 4+ 4-story deployments that are in operational plans from different firefighting entities. So if you're in the Sacramento area, they actually have fire districts, they have fire departments, but they also have a JPA called the Sacramento Regional Fire, and I don't know what the last part of it is, but it's a JPA, and they have standard operating protocols. And for them, for the Sacramento Regional, it's 5 engines, so that would be the type of pumper truck that Type 3 engine that you see out and about from Arcata Fire District would be 5 of those. 3 trucks, so those are 3 aerial trucks, 2 battalion chiefs, and 1 medic. And depending on the number of firefighters on those trucks, it would be 30 firefighters, and that would be for a first alarm. And if they showed up for a fire and the first arrivals indicate that it's bigger than they imagined. They could call in and issue a second alarm. In Berkeley, theirs is not quite as robust. They have 4 engines, 2 trucks, 1 ambulance, and 1 battalion chief for 22 firefighters. But once again, that's for a first alarm. Central County Fire, which is a district, it's a special district. It's around the airport. It's near SFO, so it's near Burlingame is part of it. I added Burlingame because I know if anybody would know where Central County was. I don't have those broken down by engines and trucks and battalion chiefs, but they have their deployment. So that's their deployment. They're written into their protocols. Their deployment for a high-rise structure fire would be 33 people. Bozeman, Montana, and I picked Bozeman, and I've got it and a few other pictures, but I picked it, and I've got some things from Laramie, Wyoming, but I picked those because they're university towns, rural university towns with nothing else surrounding them, that we could possibly look to get some idea of what other communities have expected of their fire and emergency services. And Bozeman has this for their 4+ story, and they've got like an 8-story hotel or a 10-story hotel, and some dormitories and a number of 4-story residential, 5-story residential buildings in Bozeman. And their deployment is 29 29 personnel. So when we're dealing with whether it's with a fire district or whether it's with Berkeley or Central County, or a good example would be the group in Sacramento, our agency does not act alone. We go outside of our agency and provide service to the communities around us on a regular basis. And the communities around us come into our area and help us when we need it. We don't have the staff to actually even manage a 1-story residential fire that takes 14 people. We only have 6 people plus a duty officer, 7 people on staff. So if your house is on fire, other people are going to show up. Perhaps not as fast, but they'll show up. And so we have 2 kinds of aid. One is auto aid, which when you call 911, and if you're in Arcata or McKinleyville, the district will get the dispatch call, but they'll also automatically call some of the other agencies around us, and that's called auto aid. If the first arriving engines show up and it's an OMG, they get back to dispatch, and dispatch can call in the mutual aid. I believe that's how it works. Okay. What I'm showing you here is some maps, and I am quite uncertain that ours would be quite as nice as this, but this is part of the risk analysis that was done for the city of Laverne. Laverne is in LA County, at the edge of the foothills. It's about, if I recall correctly, about a 30,000 population community. I don't know that it has any 4-story buildings. It's got some 3-story ones. They have 1 4-story ones. It's got a small college there. So it's not completely dissimilar from Arcata. It's got 3 stations. It's a way smaller square miles. But all those blue dots are LA County Fire Department stations that surround it. And so the diagram on the right actually shows the number of personnel that can show up. So they've taken all of those. They've taken the 3 red dots that represent the Laverne Fire Department stations, and they've taken all the blue dots that are LA County Fire Department and mapped out how fast those units with different numbers of personnel could get to different places in Laverne. And so they've got, and that would be in 8 minutes. So that would, obviously the first units would get there sooner, but that's how many people they could get to different locations within different periods of time. So you can see where they could get 21 to 27 is in brown, 27 to 31 is in red, and 31 to 34 is in blue. And I'm afraid that if we did this, it would not be very pretty if we did this. The chief can certainly weigh in on that perspective, but I don't think our aid would show up in that kind of time frame. Numbers of firefighters that it takes. And one of the challenges that we're faced in the district is we've transitioned 20 years ago, 25 years ago, we were 90% volunteer, 10% career, and now we're 100%, 98% career, 2% volunteers, and none of the volunteers actually provide fire suppression duties. This is a plaza fire downtown. This is looking at the corner of H and 9th, looking west. And that was a fire on the plaza, and it had 45 firefighters at it. But there was a time when the Arcata Volunteer Fire Department was the club to belong to. It actually had both fire suppression members, and it had local members that just wanted to be in the fire department. And there at some point in time, there was as many as 60 firefighters. And so calling on all of them all at once, they wouldn't necessarily be available to show up, but it was possible to get 45 firefighters out for a plaza fire in 1982. We couldn't do that today. And over on the left-hand part of that picture, you can see the old ladder truck and the ladder going up with a firefighter up there, putting water on the fire. This is a fire in Miami this past year, 2024. It's an older apartment building. Whether it was sprinkled or not, I have no idea. No one was killed, but I don't think it's any bigger than Sorrel. And it was an arson fire, took off, and the outside of the building appears to be cinder block. And one of my acquaintances who's spent some time in Miami said they build that way for hurricanes. But the inside of the building is all wood, and it burned. The whole inside burned to the ground, and it had 70 firefighters, according to the news reports that I didn't call the fire department to ask, but it had, according to the news reports. And I'm imagining that that wasn't 38 engines and trucks, but probably 38 engines, trucks, command vehicles and ambulances and stuff like that. But it had 38 of them, and it had 70 firefighters to put that fire out. And you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 ladder trucks that are involved in putting water in the middle of that building. And you can see 1 pumper truck on the ground level adding water to it as well. So how many firefighters do we have, and how many firefighters do similar sorts of communities have? And so the Arcata Fire District, on our payroll, we have 18 suppression staff. We have 7 on duty at any one time. Humboldt Bay Fire, which is a JPA, has a staff of 51, 17 on duty. And I put that one in here just so we would know what was next door. But the rest of these, Chico, San Luis Obispo, UC Davis and Davis, Merced, Laramie, Bozeman, and Corvallis, are college towns that have buildings, mass and height, largely attributable to the universities that are within them. and they don't have a lot of support. You know, UC Berkeley, and Berkeley has Oakland and other communities around it. So their mutual aid is going to be very different. Laramie, Wyoming, it's 60 or 70 miles to Cheyenne, 80 miles to Fort Collins, 115 miles to Rollins. They're all out on the prairie, all by themselves. And so I wanted to see, what do they have? So Chico, 54 suppression, 18 on duty. San Luis Obispo, 49, 14 on duty. UC Davis, there's two departments here. UC Davis has their own fire department. Davis has a fire department. They have 63 suppression staff, 21 on duty. Merced, it's a bigger town. They have 82 suppression staff, 27 are on duty at a time. Laramie has 42, 14 on duty. Bozeman, 42 and 14 on duty. And Corvallis, 76 and 17 on duty. So clearly we have substantially less on our personnel roster. So these show, and this slide and the next were put together a year or so ago by Justin McDonald. And these would be the critical tasks on the one side and the responding units on the right-hand side. So for a working fire in downtown Arcata, house, small business, we would have a command person, we'd have fire attack 2, water supply backup 2, you'd want a pump operator 1, search 2, ventilation 2, rapid intervention crew 3, and a safety officer 1 for a total of 14. That's what we would want. And what I can't see, so I don't know where the breakpoints are, but over on the far right show the response time. So the chief showing up would be bring 1 staff, Arcata engine, Mad River engine, McKinleyville engine would be 2 each. We get a chief from Blue Lake under auto aid. We get an engine from Blue Lake with 2 from auto aid. We get the Humboldt Bay Fire Chief under auto aid, that would be 1. And a special request would be the Humboldt Bay Fire truck, the ladder truck, and that would bring 4. And then the other one is Samoa, that would be by auto aid, and that would be 2. That would be a total of 17. And once again, we can't see the number over on the right-hand side, but I know it's way over 8 minutes. And this would be the fire response for the worst case scenario and the number of responses that it would take, or the time to respond. So this is if it was a complete terrible thing, sorrel burning to the ground, we could put together 43 people. And in the long and the short of it, it'd be 1 ladder truck, perhaps 2 ladder trucks from the truck from Fortuna. So it'd be the truck from Humboldt Bay and a truck from Fortuna. And there'd be a total of 43 people, but it would take over an hour, which should be completely unacceptable to all members of the community, city council, Cal Poly administration, county supervisors, and the board of directors for the fire district. And so if we went to 42, and there's a community risk assessment standard of coverage that's being done. I was hoping that it would have been done before they gave this talk, because then we could talk about some different permutations and different recommendations. But if we went to a staff of 42 with 14 on duty, and we had 3 engines with a staff of 9 each, that'd be 3 on duty, 3 shifts. We work 48 hours on, 96 hours off. So we would have a staff of 3 at each station 24/7. That'd be 9 people on a rotational shift, 27 total for three stations with engines. If we had a station with a ladder truck with a staff of 4, that would be 3 shifts of 4 people, that would be another 12 people. With shift duty officer, what we do now, we have a rotating 3 duty officers, but it's the chief and the 2 assistant chiefs. And the chief has informed me, he can elaborate on this, but he's informed me that if we added this number of staff and a 4th station, that it would be the breaking point and that we should hire battalion chiefs and have a full-time duty officer. They're typically called battalion chiefs. So it's, 27, a suppression staff of 27, the engine stations would be 27, ladder truck would be 12, duty officer, shift duty officer 3, and that's 24 additional staff over our current staffing model. And what that would cost, so 9 firefighters for the engines would be about $900,000. This is rounded off. That's for salary, insurance, their health insurance, retirement, workers' compensation, outfitting them in gear. That's all of those sorts of things. The 12 firefighters for the aerial truck cost a little more because we have 3 captains, 3 engineers, and 6.
2 additional firefighters per, so 6.
6. I had to count. I had to think. 12, so it's 6 additional, so it'd be captains, engineers, and firefighters, and that would be about $1.3 million for the staffing for an aerial truck, and 3 battalion chiefs as duty officers would be about $630,000. And who should pay? This is, once again, this is Director Loudenslager's, who's going to be president for one more day. This is my opinion, but the 9 firefighters need to be funded by our current constituents with an updated benefit assessment. We should not have 2 people on an engine. We are over-reliant on our mutual aid partners to put only 6 people on a serious house fire and have to rely on our partners to the extent we do is unacceptable from my point of view. And I think we can tackle that with updating our benefit assessment, and I can talk about that in a minute. The staffing for the aerial truck, that all belongs on 4+ story constituents. That follows from the basic tenet that if you come into the district and you want to build something and it's going to require additional infrastructure, it's going to require additional staffing, it's your obligation to pay for it. We're not going to ask, I'm not going to ask the homeowners that own a 900 square foot house in Sunnybray or live in a manufactured home in Lazy J to subsidize folks that are choosing to live in mid-rise and high-rise apartment buildings. Particularly, those are expensive buildings, rents are high in those, and if they can build them and if they can rent them, they need to build the cost of the fire services into those costs. The 3 duty officers, I think we need to, obviously we need to have the economic analysis. We need to have the green eye shade people and the calculator people get out to see how close we could get. But I think we need to try to pay for those eventually from ad valorem increases in our tax base throughout the entire district. It's not okay to expect 4+ story constituents or Cal Poly Humboldt to pay for the 9 firefighters on engines or the duty officers that would serve district-wide. And my proposal, so this is a straw man floating the idea. First off, is that the state, Cal Poly Humboldt Advancement Foundation need to initially fund all of this. They need to cough up the money and lay out the funds and get it started soon, like very soon. We had a meeting January 25th, 2023 that involved the city, the district, and Cal Poly and our elected representatives, the senator and our assembly person. And our senator said he could do nothing in Sacramento until we knew what the costs were and that we'd had an analysis done. That's what the agreement over the community risk assessment and standard of coverage was about. And we're still waiting. It took 10 months to get that from that December 25th meeting to getting it out of the city's finance offices. And now it's taken another 10 or 11 months to have the consultant get that done. But that'll give us a better picture of exactly the manpower needs and the facility needs. But in my view, the money needs to come forth immediately, and the state and Cal Poly should come forth with it. And then we can start doing the work we need to do on our end. For example, if we need a fire engine or fire truck or another fire engine, I'm not sure we need a fire truck. But regardless, if we need an engine or a truck, that's my estimate right now would be 24 to 30 months. Post order, would you concur with that?
Probably closer to 4 years to get a truck.
Could be up to 4 years to get a truck. So that's why this needed to have happened before. It's too late to shed tears over that now. But if we really want the protection, then it needs to happen soon so we can get these things underway. The benefit assessment update for me, this is my policy view. The 2006 benefit assessment was assessed at $22 per unit. If we plug that into cost of living, the CPI calculators that you get online, the $1.4 million, the $22 assessment turns into about a $35 assessment, and the $1.4 million that we get for that annually turns into about 2.25 million, which is an $810,000 increase. So I am advocating for a cost of living adjustment to bring our assessment up based on inflation from 2006 to 2024. And I'm advocating that we add an inflation and annual inflation adjustment to annually to that base $35 a unit. So we don't go 20 years without updating it and then have to have all kinds of anxiety and arguments in the community about whether that's really justified or needed. Now, that $810 million increase does not get us to $900,000. And so there is some unequal playing field, in my view, in how the district did there. And this is the district's responsibility, no one else's. But when they put the benefit assessment together in 2006, they said that a single residence was 4 units, $88. They had multifamily units at 2 to 4 units, or 2 to 4 units would be 8 units of assessment, and multifamily 5 to 9 units are 10 units under our current assessment. And multifamily 10 plus caps out at 12 units and $264 a year. And I think that classifying a 3-bedroom apartment, a 12,000 square or a 1,200 square foot single apartment, 3-bedroom apartment having it the same unit benefit to that as a studio, a 350 square foot studio, is probably not fair. But it also leaves us with less income than we need. So what I think is that the units for multifamily units should be reevaluated. And I put out there as a straw man, 1 unit for every 600 square feet. And whether it should be a little higher, whether it should be a little lower, whether there should be break points, you know, that can be discussed. But as an example of what that would mean, Sorrel Place is 44 units. Currently, that gets classified as a multifamily 10 plus, and they pay $264, which is not enough. Under a revised, it would be 65 benefit units, and it would be $2,275. So I did this calculation just so, and I don't really do anything with these dollars. It's simply to show that our ad valorem tax base will not cover all of these expenses, because that issue has been raised in more than one forum, is that we're going to get these new buildings and they cost a lot of money. They're really expensive, and your tax base is going to go up, and everything will be wonderful. It'll pay for everything. And I don't believe so. If somebody wants to do an assessment and write to us and say that I'm way wrong, I'm certainly open to that. I've been corrected before. But Sorrel Place, and so what I used as my base to try to figure out how much does it cost to build these buildings. I used Sorrel Place and the Craftsman student housing, and the dollars for those were in 2019 and 2022 respectively, and they reported the cost and the square footage. And when you adjust those for inflation, they both come out to approximately $700 per square feet for each of those. The gateway plan for the city is 500 units in the next 20 years. In the gateway plan, the average unit size is 949 square feet, plus they've got a bunch of square feet because they require mixed use in all those buildings. And if you add the mixed use in, it comes out to each unit being 1,200 square feet based on the gateway area plan. So that would be 513,500 square feet. I believe that McKinleyville is planning some growth in the center of town, and perhaps the assisted independent living that's been proposed, I think, for down where the grocery outlet is, would be potentially what I'm calling it, 2 Sorrels. This isn't on paper yet, but I'm trying to put these sorts of numbers into reasonable scope of projection. So if we had 2 Sorrels in the next 20 years, that would be just under $80,000 or square feet. So, yeah, square feet. So that would be a total of 593,000 square feet. And the tax base, you take that 593,000 square feet, that square feet times $700 per square foot, you wind up with $415 million. And our 1% ad valorem tax would be $4,151,000. And our 5.6% of that 1% would be about $232,000. So that's from the growth in tax base. That's about what I expect from the 4+ story buildings over the next 20 years. And is there anything under that way over on the right-hand side? So if we look at a benefit assessment, so we need to adjust the benefit assessment, and how to do this legally is going to require some lawyers. We could do a benefit assessment only for 4+ story. But then we could only use the resources on the 4+ story buildings. We couldn't use them elsewhere. So we have to rewrite the benefit assessments so that it covers equally everything. But nonetheless, if we're charging the aerial truck staffing to the 4+ story houses, that would be on a per person basis. So if we look at the population, so Craftsman Student Housing, 964 students, Gateway, 500 units, 2.25 people per unit on average. Sorrel has a capacity of 81. I'm attributing 162 to McKinleyville. That'd be 2,332 people. They get to fund $1,300,000 for staffing the truck. That comes out to $560 per person per year. And if you break it down by the square footage in the previous one, that's $1.53 per year per square foot. And if we do benefit assessment, then for the Craftsman Student Housing, Cal Poly would get billed $330,000 per year. The Gateway, $500,000 to the developers would be $785,000. Sorrel, and I'm sure Sorrel, the Danco would choke saying this, I'm sure, but Sorrel should be paying $61,000 a year for coverage, adequate coverage for 4+ stories. And McKinleyville, 2 times Sorrel would be $122,000, and that would provide that amount of money. Capital improvements. I'm suspecting that I put 10 to 20 million, but these aren't official estimates of any sort. But I think we would actually be looking at probably a minimum of $20 million. I think that's a reasonable statement to make. And we would be looking at a 4th fire station, remodeling the Mad River Station, purchasing an aerial ladder truck, and building a mid-rise training center. And I wanted to show you, just so a mid-rise training center is not a big glass building with a classroom in it. It's a place that fire districts and fire departments go and fill them up with smoke and go in there with their self-contained breathing apparatuses on and practice what it's like to be in those intensive environments. This happens to be the training center that Laramie, Wyoming has built for its community. You can see they have a 4-story tower. Looks like a mock-up of a 2-story building in the back, and then they've got all those tipped over automobiles over on the left-hand side that they can practice getting people out of and cutting up, dealing with a tanker truck. They've got trains that go by and an I-highway, so some of their risks that they would be associated with. Okay, capital improvements, who pays? My suggestion is that State of California, CP Humboldt, perhaps the Humboldt Advancement Foundation. I don't know how much they have in their bank accounts, that they set up an account for the fire district with whatever we need, up, perhaps around $20 million, that we can start doing the work we need to do. I think the funding of this largely should be reimbursed by the city of Arcata and the Humboldt County of Humboldt via development impact fees. And to my knowledge right now, the county doesn't have them and the city doesn't have them. We don't have them in the district because the county, if we had development impact fees in the county, in the district, unincorporated area, the county would have to implement them. We can't implement them on our own. The development impact fees from the mid-rise there would be impact fees on mid-rise, single family, low-rise, multifamily, and commercial. Everybody in the district needs to have some impact fees applied to them so that we can do the capital improvements and have the resources we need. Impact fees, by the way, can only be used for capital purchases. They can't be used for salary. They can't be used for administration. The mid-rise funds would pay for an aerial truck, Mad River remodel, and half the training facility. Single family, low-rise commercial funds would pay for half the training facility and a fourth station. And I'm anticipating that there would be development impact fees of $10 to $15 per square foot per single family and low rise, $25,000 to $30,000 or $25,000 to $30 per square foot for the multi-rise, the 4+. In the San Francisco Bay Area, multi-rise apartments per unit are now paying, depending on where you are, Berkeley, San Francisco. Let's see if I can find the exact number. So large apartment projects per unit, Oakland, $40,000 per unit, Berkeley, $66,000 per unit, in San Francisco, $75,000 per unit for impact fees to pay for all the infrastructure that needs to be put in for these new buildings. Okay, I'm basically done. I will only say that at this point in time, the last memorandum of understanding or contract we had with the city, we don't have one with Cal Poly. The last one we had with the city was the ordinance that annexed them into the district, and I think we need new ones to deal with all of the changes in the environment and changes in governance and things like that. We need to arrive at a policy congruence where the desire for service, the willingness to fund, and the zoning entities, the county, the state, and the city are the ones that set up the zoning regulations, and their zoning needs to incorporate the infrastructure needs, the capacity of the fire district to provide services. I'm done. How long did I take? I was
An hour and 20 minutes or so.
Did we have an hour and a half? Did I go over or?
No, you're okay. We're 6 minutes over. Don't worry about it. I think the point you're making is that we've gone ahead and approved buildings, or certainly Cal Poly did, and the city has with the Gateway District, although nobody's built anything. We have buildings for which we cannot service or will not be able to service. They seem to be counting on fire suppression by sprinkler. And we still don't have the standard of coverage study completed, so we don't know what the state of the art is going to be for what coverage is. You are estimating it, and your estimates are probably, you've made comparisons with other cities that are comparable potentially, but it's going to cost a bundle, and they're going to have to allocate these costs, and it's going to be a major inflation in costs, not only for the single family residents, but for every unit. So the concept of building high rises and having low, inexpensive or lower cost housing, if it's higher housing, is going to be an illusion because of the associated infrastructure costs because of the fire problem, right? Is that about right?
That could be how, weighing in on, and Chris should weigh in on that too. When I look, the communities I've looked at for high-rise, mid-rise housing has been Bend, Oregon, and Bozeman, Montana. And all of the units that they have are luxury units. There's no it's all market rate, and it's usually upper end market rate. So in Bozeman, a 1,500 square foot, 3-bedroom, on the 6th floor, the rent is $6,000 a month. 1,000 square foot unit in Bozeman is $3,000 to $4,000 a month. If you go to Bend and look at studios and 1-bedrooms, they're in the $1,500 to $2,000 range. I don't know if any developer wants or can or is even gonna, I mean, and I'm just asking, this is a rhetorical question. Why would you come to Arcata and do all kinds of push-ups and sit-ups and try to build units that you can rent for $1,200 a month? Because that's the maximum that the area can sustain, when you could go to Bend and do the same thing and rent them for $1,800, or go to Bozeman and rent them for $2,500 and have a much bigger cushion in your construction. But that's up to the building people. I don't. But to answer one of the other questions or statement you made, I did find it disturbing and troubling and alarming that the development department in Arcata thought that it would be simply adequate to add wider stairwells to buildings, and that would be more than enough to provide adequate first response for 4+ story buildings. First, I don't even know that it's legal to do that, because that's a fire code element, that there's stringent regulations about how you can upgrade things, and whether it's legal or not, I don't know. But that's essentially saying, with the staffing that we have, plus mutual aid, we would not be able to send anyone into those buildings, and we would be depending on the residents to evacuate themselves and rescue themselves. And that would be families with small children, elderly people with and others with mobility issues, that we wouldn't have the staff to go into those buildings and deal with them. And that's unconscionable, unacceptable.
When you get the results of the study, what will happen next?
Yes.
Okay, so where we're at with the study at this point is within the next week or so, we should get a technical review for Arcata Fire staff, City of Arcata staff, and CalPoly staff that were participating in it. We'll get the technical review and be able to make any changes. That won't be a public draft at that point. Following any revisions on the technical review, it'll go, or we'll receive it's an administrative review. And at that point, it should essentially be done. And then the 3 agencies, CalPoly, Humboldt, City of Arcata, and Arcata Fire Protection District, governing boards or councils, will have the opportunity to review and accept however, whatever the report is at that point. So we're hoping probably within January to have the final document going to the government agencies.
So I don't get to see the technical review, but I get
You
to
can
see
the
I
administrative
get to
review.
see the administrative review.
If there were a fire now in the 7-story building being constructed and not finished at this time, when is it supposed to be finished and ready for occupancy? Do you know?
I believe it's next.
One of the units is supposed to be next fall, and the second unit next January. That's my understanding.
That's my understanding as well.
So this needs to be resolved. So if something were to happen and it belongs to CalPoly, presumably the state would have to come up with the funding to either rebuild it or protect it or whatever have you. Is that a presumption?
Well, yeah, I mean, if something happens there, obviously we're gonna respond, but we're gonna be sorely, understaffed.
Understaffed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we're gonna go, I mean, we go because that's what we do, but, to be able to operate efficiently and safely, it's not gonna happen. We'll do what we can. You risk a lot to save a lot, but we're also not gonna kill firefighters for a building.
Yeah. So when you get this document, the three entities will get together and say, who's going to pay, right?
Well, I think what'll happen is the document will most likely have recommendations in it on how it can be split up amongst the jurisdictions. Obviously, recommendations aren't mandates, but it'll hopefully have some merit with it. So,
Well, the last assessment that was voted for took 2 ballots, successive ballot, before it got passed to raise it. Who has to vote on this in order for these things to happen?
as far as it goes out, well, it depends. It depends on if it's a benefit assessment revision or if it's a special tax ballot, because obviously if it's a benefit assessment if that's a 50+1 weighted ballot that goes out to the property owners versus a special tax goes to everybody within the jurisdiction, and that's a 2/3 vote.
So it took 2 votes last time to get the special tax through, is that right?
Right.
And that tax would jump by what percentage if we did these things?
So just to fill in, to back up a bit, the benefit assessment will go up if the board decides that they want to go ahead with the revision of the benefit assessment. It would go up by inflation, by the CPI from 2006 to 2024, go up from $22 to $35. That's quite a step, but it's what they didn't do it for year after year after year. There will be, and I'm only speaking as one board member. I will not bring a measure before the public that has $1 of special tax that goes toward City of Arcata mid-rise buildings or Cal Poly dorm buildings before we renew at its current level plus inflation, our current special tax. And what this scares me. So we have a special tax now that went from 2020 to 2030. And it was front loaded a little bit. So the rates were flat. It had no adjustment built into it, no inflation adjustment built into it, and it had a sunset at 2030. And they front loaded the first few years. We're bringing in a few extra dollars so we can save those in the bank for salaries so that they'll get paid out. That was the calculation. Those will get paid out in the end. If we don't pass another special tax, we're going to have to close the station. If we don't close,
We're already having a potential crisis without adding high-rise buildings.
without any of these new buildings. And so I'm not at all interested in going to the public and asking them to fund these new things when, if it fails, we have to close a station and can't even keep up with what we've got. Now, that's a board decision, and other board members could say, no, we need to go for all of it all at once, put it all in one measure and see whether they're sleeping that day and click yes. So I'm only one person, but I am not at all good. And the reason, once again, the reason why, there's two reasons. One, I don't think our other constituents should be asked to pay for it. And two, I'm afraid that it would get turned down, and then we'd be in a real world of hurt. Because if we did that, so if we, when we do the next vote, I'm uncertain. The chief is planning for that now. We could do a benefit assessment in 2026. We could do the special tax, look at it in 2026. But if it fails in 2026, we can come back in 2028 or something like that. But if it fails then, if we can't get it together to get that on the ballot till 2028 and it fails, we're in a real crunch. Do you agree with that?
I agree, and I think one of the things we're facing, it was mentioned earlier in the presentation, is we're looking at voter fatigue at this point too, which is very concerning. It seems like every 2 years, there's 20 different ballot measures that are thrown out there to see what sticks by different agencies, and we're always behind. We're the ones that are always behind all of those, and of course, everybody thinks that their ballot measure is the most important, but if we're each time we have to face that, it gets more challenging for us.
Let's look at Sorrel, for example. I understand the rents at Sorrel have already, for some reason, skyrocketed. Is that the case? And does that have something to do with fire rates
No.
assessments?
So Sorrel and Danko would have to answer that question completely. I can't. But the apartments in Sorrel is 100% affordable housing. And the rents are set at some proportion, 1/3 of the incomes at various rates. So we have the median area income. And there's very, very low, low, moderate. I think moderate is like 80%, or maybe moderate income is 120% of the median income in the area. But Sorrel's rents are pegged at 1/3 of those. You have to have income qualification to get into the apartments. And then if the area, like if everybody gets rich and the area mean income goes up, then Sorrel rents can go up. The other element here is Sorrel pays no property tax. They do pay the benefit assessment, and I believe they pay the special tax. We would have to confirm that with them, but they don't pay property tax, but they do pay the assessments.
So they do pay a current, the whole property pays an assessment for fire, correct?
$264 for
But it should be way higher. Is that
well, that's
correct?
what I argued in my presentation where I showed what Sorrel would look like if I showed two pictures.
Yeah, I know. You showed what it would be way higher. And how does that get adjusted to be realistic for what it should be paying, and who pays it?
Well, ultimately the renters pay it, and it gets raised by a vote of the parcel owners. So Danko would get a vote, and all the homeowners would get a vote, and all the apartment owners get a vote. It's a weighted vote.
Are they actually apartment owners, or are they simply renters?
Oh, no, it wouldn't be the renters. It's the owners. It's the parcel owners.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know how it works. Like if for Sorrel, I don't know if we listed Sorrel on the ballot as 65 units, whether they get 65 votes, and my wife and I each get 4 votes, or whether we get 1 vote for the parcel, and then empty parcels our one unit, they would get one vote. I'm not 100% sure of how all of those work. But we definitely need to get on all of those. We need to have affirmative votes from all the single family, and because the owners, who's going to pay under that scheme are apartment owners that have large numbers of apartments on a single parcel that are getting taxed at a very low rate today, that we're going to request that they fund at a higher level. And I fully expect that they would be unhappy. If I were in their situation, I would not be delighted when I saw what was being proposed, but I think it's fair.
So if I'm a developer and I'm looking to build a 6-story building in the gateway area, not on the coastal zone, but in the gateway area somewhere, they're going to have to, somebody is going to have to estimate how much is going to be paid per unit, right?
Yeah.
Who will do that?
Either we do it or the county does it when the tax bills go out. And part of the reason I would like to see this done sooner than later is I think the developers need to see these bills now. So if you're a developer in the Bay Area and you've seen these proposals come out from the city, and the city is gonna entertain you, come up and take you to the Jacoby Storehouse for ribs or whatever, and show you around town, they need to know if they're gonna have to pay $35,000 per unit in development impact fee. And they need to know if they're gonna have to pay $600 per person per year, sort of as a prorated occupancy for tax purposes for fire. Because they build it into the rent. The renters pay it eventually. And if it's too expensive.
It's an illusion that we're going to have low-cost housing with high-story housing, mid-story housing. Probably.
What was the question?
Is it then an illusion that we can create mid-story housing or high-story housing affordably?
I'm skeptical, but I'll leave that up to that's the planning department and the city and the developers bailiwick, not mine. So I will be careful of what I say, because
well, I presume they're going to be provided with the information you've put together.
Yeah, well, they've seen other information. They weren't impressed with it.
So they go ahead anyway. Okay. Does anybody else have?
They propose wider stairwells.
And that wider stairwell is actually a state push. I've talked to some building officials from various areas, and there's building officials out there reaching out because they know we are concerned about that, as they are as well. And they're like, what's the fire industry's perspective? And it's like, we're totally against that as a sacrifice or a compromise, I guess is a better way, but
Substitution.
it's if
You
there's
don't want
a
to substitute staff for a wider stairwell.
correct, there's a lobby, I'll say there's a lobby group out there, an interest group that is pushing this. And I would imagine it's probably from developers because it keeps costs down. But from the fire standpoint, it's a significant safety concern because not only can we not get the people out if their exit paths are obstructed, but we can't get firefighters in to do what we need to do if the exit path, or in our case, it would be the entrance path would be obstructed, or all the folks trying to come out. It's going to slow them down
By having all the people coming out.
by having all the people coming out one pathway. I mean, obviously extreme case, but go back to 9/11 and look at all the people coming down the stairwells, and the firefighters are you're swimming upstream, trying to get up through hundreds of people trying to come down stair mounts.
Well, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens when the study actually comes out and everybody faces up to the actual costs required.
Sure.
So, does anybody else have comments or questions? I've certainly asked a few. Anybody?
I think we're at time.
Yeah, I know we're out of time. Thank you ever so much for this presentation. It was thorough. And we're looking forward to when that standards of coverage study comes out and what the implications will be when you all get together, the three entities, and hash out who's going to pay. That's the bottom line question. How much are they going to underwrite and who's going to pay for it and who's got legal liability if it isn't adequate? Because that's another aspect of it. Thank you so much. This is our final presentation for this session, fall session, and we're going to look forward to seeing you. I believe it's next February 27th or something like that in the new year. And I'll wish you all happy holidays. Have a wonderful time. And thank you for supporting OLLI. Take care, everybody.